people often ask if I have any regrets in my life, and I say, I don't believe in regrets, because they just make you feel shitty about yourself. And specifically, the question comes up. I know what they're asking, right? Is at the time of my life I became infamous. I'm probably too old, but I guess you guys are about my age, some people older. There's a movie called The Three Amigos. You guys remember that? Yeah. And infamous. It's better than famous. I became infamous when I chose cannabis over the NFL. And at the time it was a controversial decision. Still to this day, I mean, obviously, you guys know cannabis is still controversial, but not nearly as much. And I was messing around on Twitter the other day, and someone said something about my story being tragic. And I know what he meant, but I took the opportunity to speak on it. And I said, I don't consider it tragic, is that I thank the NFL every day for helping me realize there are more important things in the world than football. Right? And then I wrote ... like getting high. and like that's as a 44-year-old, not as a 27-year-old. And I actually meant it more. I meant it more as a 44-year-old than I did, when I walked away from football. Because most of us know that when you're young, it's true. You're dumber than you are when you're older. Okay? Thank God, right? As we live, we learn, we grow, we evolve, right? And we evolve personally, and our relationships evolve. Okay? And as we've seen the past 15, 16 years since then, we've seen the relationship in this country evolve with cannabis. And we've seen it state by state, literally county by county. Okay? And the question that all of us, or a couple of questions that all of us have had to wrestle with, is how do we deal with our past attitudes? Okay? How do we deal with our past attitudes? And I don't mean that, I mean that for everyone, because for pretty much all of us, except for I talked to some people that grew up in the 60s, they don't seem to have the same kind of hang-ups, some of them, but most of us do. And what we were taught, at least what I was taught, was that cannabis was bad for me. Coaches, teachers, if you do this, you're gonna be a loser. If you do this, you're gonna be right. All of that, okay? Whether we were the ones teaching that to our kids or we were the ones receiving it, it got in there, okay? And it's something that I think we have to find a way to deal with, because I think for cannabis to move forward in a healthy way, that old stuff is gonna come to the surface, and we gotta find a way to process it and deal with it. And I think this is a business discussion, because I think for cannabis to become what it can be as a business, as a medicine, again, I think we have to look at these. We have to look at these things. And being someone who was on the other side of it, okay, is that now I can sit up here and there's a room full of people listening to me talk about consuming cannabis. Okay, 15, 16 years ago, it was the opposite. Okay, I'm not gonna ask you guys where were you. I won't do it. It's a joke. You're supposed to laugh. Yeah, thank you. No, but seriously, just coming from where I came from, and I had to wrestle with the same exact questions. I left the NFL, and what did they say? The world's biggest underachiever. Okay, pothead leaves the NFL, but I ruined my life. Okay, and as I left the NFL, I had to think: is that true? Is my life ruined? And most people would say someone that's controversial, quits their job, gets kicked out of their job for drugs, kind of think that life is kind of over. But I had a decision to make. I said I'm going to question everything I've been taught with what's in my heart. There's some, because it's easy to say, and I look at it in people, I see it in people's eyes when they talk to me, and they say, "Dude, all that money, couldn't you just stop smoking weed?" Right? And that's real, right? And I hope most of you guys feel that if you're being real, you should have that question, okay? And this is also related to business, and I hope it's not a cliche. I hope it's not a cliche, but there are more important things in the world than money, okay? And when I say I hope it's not a cliche, it's easy to say, but if you look at the choices you're making in your life, do those choices support that, okay? Okay, so for me, I think through the choices I've made, I think I've proven that there are things in life that are more important to me. And again, I go back to thanking the NFL for that. So I left the NFL, with this question, is everything that I worked my life for to be the best football player I could be, and then giving that up, like, is my life over? Yeah. But what I found is my life was just beginning. I was speaking earlier, the question about regrets came up, and I had a thought that I hadn't had before. I said if I hadn't left the NFL and I'd only been a football player, okay, and I was invited to speak here. Yes, there might be more people in the room, okay, but I would be miserable because everyone would want to talk about what? Football, okay? I haven't touched a football in almost 10 years, so football is great, but there's other things that I'm more interested in, okay? And so I'm in a room, people that are here, and we get to talk about cannabis, like, hell yes. And that's what I mean about, things being more important than money. Quality of life. Quality of life. And at least, the way I can look myself in the mirror when I go to bed at night is knowing that I've consistently made choices to improve the quality of my life. And now I get to come hang out with people like you guys. So it's really an honor to be here and share a little piece of my story, which is going to be shared in a biopic. And so it's interesting. This guy reached out to me and said, when you walked away from the NFL, I felt inspired. He said, I walked away from a lucrative job to find myself, and I want to make a movie about it. So he's almost done writing the movie, and he's won an Academy Award, so there's a good chance the movie will get picked up. And he wants to name it Ricky Williams in Australia, because that year is where I wrestled with the question, okay, did I ruin my life? And at the end of the year, about the end of the year, I was in India because I found yoga, astrology, I found all these things that I never knew existed. And I was in the Himalayas, and we were driving up the Himalayas, and I'm with my yoga teacher, and I look out the window, driving up the Himalayas, and there's just cannabis like plants growing wild for miles, and that question of, I flash back to all the, the commercial with the eggs and the skillet, if you do this, yeah. And I was like, all that is bullshit, right? This is medicine, this is natural, and I think I'm onto something. And so it's become a mission and a part of my life, not only to advocate for cannabis, but to advocate for altered states of consciousness in general, because I think the truth is we can only truly be happy if we can rise above it for a little bit. And we've heard this a lot too. I get at least one of these jokes daily on social media. How high are you? And my response is, how low are you? Right? People are allowed to say how high are you, but we're not allowed to say how dumb are you, right? So yeah, this is part of my story, and so altered states of consciousness, cannabis, but also in my story there's this other little piece. There's a Bob Marley song, one of my favorite Bob Marley songs, and the lyrics go, I think it's a Bible verse: "The stone that the builder refuses will always be the head cornerstone." Okay? In my life, I was ashamed, I was embarrassed, I tried to hide my cannabis use from the world, and when it became public, I thought my life was over. Right? And now look at me, okay? Now it's become a big part of my life, and it's weird. Coming into the NFL, I always said I want to find a purpose. I want to give back. Okay? And I never in my mind thought it would be this way. But it's been meaningful. I've been able to touch a lot of people. I've been able to be myself. Okay? And I think that's been the most important thing for me, is the ability to be myself. And I'm starting a brand called Heisman, and it's about all the things that I'm talking about. It's really changing the conversation about cannabis. I think of all the athletes and famous people who've gotten a lot of mainly athletes, have gotten a lot of shit and hurt their reputations, hurt their pocketbook because of cannabis. And for me, I'm like, we're seeing all these people, especially as people are starting to tell the truth more about their cannabis use. Maybe it's time to stop punishing them, and it's time to start asking, what are you on to? Okay, what are you on to? And that's what the Heisman is about. Our tagline is spark greatness. And instead of looking at the negative side and even the idea of trying to change the stigma, we're doing that. But even that, you're fighting against something negative. I'm more about promoting something positive. Okay? Hallelujah. Yes. And I would say with you guys, my encouragement to you guys is, instead of, it's an ask, I'll own that, right? But instead of hiding your cannabis use, instead of downplaying your cannabis use, I'm not saying get on the mountain and scream about it, but at least be honest, right? And honest in the sense of how does it help you, right? How does it improve the quality of your life? Having those conversations, right? That's even better than why do you smoke? Why do you, right? That isn't, you feel the heaviness and the negativity of that, right? It's because our mind is that this is something bad, and we're all inside kind of wrestling with it. And I think the way to heal that, the way to change that, is to be proactive in our minds and to think, how does cannabis add to my life? How does it increase the quality of my life? And I think that's the way to change all of this. Thank you guys for listening to me ramble for a little bit. I'll be here until Tuesday.